Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Avorion episode 20. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing with the Samson build. This is a seat of my pants kind of build, at least through most of this episode. I had an idea in my head when I started it, general idea of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with it. Less informed than some of my other builds in the sense that sometimes I go into a build and I have a fairly clear idea of what I want to do, and it becomes simply a matter of translating that into the game, and then of course making adjustments along the way as the situation may suggest or demand. In this case, I had only the most general of ideas of what I wanted to do in terms of the appearance of the ship. I knew what I wanted to do in terms of the ship's function. I wasn't even 100% clear on what that would look like in terms of what kind of equipment that I would have. The main sort of thing that I had in mind is that I would be happier with a ship that has a lot of armor, a lot of meat between the outer hull and the important bits on the inside, and also more efficient use of the interior space of the ship. With the Malapis, we had a fair bit of interior space that wasn't used. It was kind of like this open cavity, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially when a ship starts off kind of a little on the weak side in terms of performance, and you have this available space inside where you can upgrade as you go without having to remodel. So that was not necessarily, I felt, a bad thing in terms of the design, but there's also that sort of line of thought that says, what if we filled up that empty space with more armor? Or what if we just made a decision and jammed a bunch of equipment in there and just kind of run with it, sort of thing? So there's different ways to approach it. And in this case, I decided that we would go with the idea that I have a pretty good understanding of the handling characteristics and how it all fits together, in the sense of a ship that's fun to pilot, functional to get around, and do what you want to do without feeling like you're fighting the ship everywhere you go, and a role that we want to take on for the ship in order to be able to progress in the game. It was very important. So we've started building this whole thing out of titanium, all titanium armor so far. The only thing that's not titanium armor are the titanium components and the iron inertial dampeners, because as I understand it, inertial dampeners are only available as an iron component. There is no material upgrade, or if there is, it's beyond what I currently have access to. So that's kind of where we're at with it. You can see we've got some more engines going in place. We've got sort of this really stubby, compact central part of the ship, and it's started to remind me of like a beetle, just the way that it was shaped and the way it was coming together, which is not necessarily a bad thing to have a familiar shape, but it wasn't necessarily what I had in mind. And the more I thought about it, the more I decided that if I wanted a ship that looked like a beetle, I would make a ship called the Beetle, and I would make it look like a beetle. So you'll see a number of changes, even, you know, between now and the end of this episode. Not necessarily sweeping changes, but trying different things, of course, like we do so often, letting them sit for a few minutes, changing our mind, switching them up, removing some stuff that we had from the last episode, and ultimately making a little bit of progress over a certain amount of time. But in this case, it's progress that sort of leads to larger steps on down the line that should make the whole thing a fair bit easier to manage. So if you missed the last episode, or you just need a refresher, the primary purpose for this ship is generating resources, mining, salvaging, and following around. When other ships in a sector fight, they usually leave behind a wreckage field, and I learned with the Malapis that it would be important to have a certain amount of cargo space so that we can go through these wreckage fields and pick up things that are valuable that we can then go and sell. Up till now, the majority of my credits come from selling systems and turrets that are of a lower sort of quality. They have the colored tier system that you see in a lot of games. White is sort of like the baseline, and then you've got green, which is a little bit better, and then blue, which is better still, and it goes all the way up through the different colors, orange, purple, stuff like that. So if I go into the whole sort of tradesman mindset, whenever I go by a station that buys equipment or turrets and I sell off all of the white and even sometimes the green quality items that I have, I usually end up with enough credits to cover my costs, as long as I'm mining or salvaging the actual ore that I need to kind of round everything out. I would like to put myself in a position where if I wanted to, I had the credits where I could afford to buy a lot of the ore that I might need for some of the builds that I have in mind as a, I don't want to say shortcut, but as another opportunity to kind of move forward in the sense of gathering the resources. Sometimes mining, what I found actually with the Malapis and doing the upgrades and then also putting myself in a mindset to get ready for this particular build, is that sometimes the whole mining thing, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It can be just a very casual, relaxing thing that you do, you know, going from asteroid to asteroid and gathering all the bits, potentially going from sector to sector and continuing with the whole idea. But as always, there's the risk of bad guys showing up and shooting at you, causing damage to your ship, which you have to repair. And there was a point with the Malapis where just through sheer bad luck, I ended up constantly taking more damage than I could gather materials to repair. And it was this sort of constant backward struggle, trying to move forward, gathering enough materials to put towards the next project, and always ending up having to sacrifice some of the things that I had gathered just to cover the repairs. And like I say, in a few cases, being basically broke, gathering a few resources, taking some damage because some bad guys jumped in on top of me, and then going to repair and finding out that I didn't have enough. I'd actually sort of lost resources in the exchange. So things that influence this ship are this whole idea of how much we lose in terms of materials when the ship takes damage. How much is it going to cost us to repair this ship in terms of credits and materials when the ship is damaged, and how long do we have when we realize we're in trouble to get the hell out of the way before that material cost ramps up to the point where it gets frustrating. So part of the process here, you can see we've got the, this is creative mode, by the way, and a viewer was kind enough to pass along the script that you can enter that gives you a wider range of creative-like commands. It's the dev commands menu, basically, is what it enables, so that we can make our ship invincible, which is nice when we're building it. We can make it invincible, and then if bad guys show up, we don't have to worry about the whole build process being disrupted the way it can be. But we've got this ship. The basic idea is that it's bulky, it's got lots of armor, and we're adding integrity fields to the ship as well, so that we're getting more health out of the blocks that we have, so that when bad guys start shooting at us, we can just kind of flip around and get out of the way. And the ship is going to take a little bit of damage, but if we're kind of on the ball and responding appropriately to things as they're happening, it shouldn't be to the extent that we're kind of falling behind just because of the timing and the location of where they jumped in relative to where we are. I've got basically everything that I need in this ship at this point, except I realized that all this stuff in the back of my mind of things that I wanted to have in the ship, and one of the key things being cargo space, because that was one of the deficiencies in the Malapis, and I completely forgot to put cargo containers on the ship. We fixed that. It's fine. We've got lots, and you can see just how thick the armor is between those components in the middle of the ship and the outer portions of the ship. So we're in a good spot in terms of what we're getting into place versus what I think we're going to need. There we go with the integrity field. For if you haven't seen this before, this is the first time that I've done it. But when we added the blocks that gave us the integrity field, the blocks that are affected by it turned blue, which currently is all of them. So I'll be keeping an eye on it to make sure that whatever we end up with is getting as much benefit out of the integrity field as we can, so that we have that little bit of extra. As far as I can tell, the integrity field is kind of like a shield in the sense that it increases the health of the blocks, which basically means we can take that much more damage before the blocks get destroyed, which in turn means that we can take damage for longer before it starts costing us valuable resources that we would have preferred to have applied somewhere else. Once this ship is done, we're going to take it back into our our survival kind of scenario, where I already have some of the systems that I really wanted to have in place for this ship. Specifically, I've got 2 systems that we can add to this ship that will allow us to have an additional 8 total unarmed turrets on the ship. So we can have 2 now, as far as I recall. It's either 1 or 2 that you can start off with as a default, and then we add 8 more. So we could have 9 or 10 salvage turrets or mining turrets or a combination thereof, not to exceed that total amount, so that we can just kind of scoot around and do the mining, do the salvaging. We'll have some generic weapon turrets for basic defense, but this isn't really intended to be a combat sort of vessel. And with any luck, we'll be able to progress and start. What I really would like to do is start getting into larger and larger ships as we go. This one is going to end up being probably about the same size as the Malapis. It's going to be bulkier, more robust. It's going to be able to take more of a beating. But if we put the 2 side by side, it's not going to. I don't expect it's going to be that much bigger, visually at least. So we've got. I'm trying to finish off this back section, the body of the ship, and put it together in a way that all the seams come together in a way that works for me. Except I don't have, like I say, a clear idea of exactly specifically what I'm aiming for. So there's a lot of putzing around and kind of trying different things that may or may not be successful. In this case, I've decided to add, and this was part of the design from the beginning, but I wasn't sure specifically how I wanted it implemented, but basically outriggers, similar to like nacelles, where we have some hull components that are extended out from the center of mass of the ship. And I want to try another run at directional thrusters, because my experience with thrusters and directional thrusters up to this point has not really been a positive one, in the sense that you feel like the space that you've allotted for these things is space that's well spent. As soon as I started messing around with gyros and inertial dampeners, I realized that the whole directional thruster thing wasn't working. But I recall at some point reading that the directional thrusters, or the thrusters, have a greater effect the farther away they are from the center of mass. And that makes a great deal of sense to me, just from life experience. And the farther away something is, when you apply force to it, the faster it moves with the same amount of force, as opposed to being very close to the center. Hopefully that makes sense. It makes sense to me. So that's going to be the basis for this little experiment. If it doesn't work out, we're going to have these outriggers that will be probably not all that useful. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would actually be truly beneficial, that would make sense to have set up this way. But there could be worse things to have on your ship than a little bit of space to work with that doesn't currently have a purpose yet and isn't causing any harm for being there. If anything, it's just more armored titanium blocks on the side of the ship that the bad guys have to shoot through if they're attacking the ship from the side, I guess is probably the most apt way I can put it. So you can see we've got the directional thrusters put into place. And now it's just a matter of kind of finishing off either end of these sort of outriggers to make it look, I mean, it doesn't even have to look all that especially interesting. We're not in this stage yet where I'm doing that sort of looking over it and trying to find opportunities to make things look a little bit more interesting. But one thing that I've been practicing is my slotted rear vent sort of approach. It's quick and it's easy, and it affords a certain measure of protection. It's not as effective as if it was just a solid block, but it looks better. So we have that going for us. So the next episode, we're basically going to pick up where we left off here. The main thing that we have left to do once this front section of the outriggers is done is the actual front section of the ship, which is going to be probably to some extent a little bit detached from the main body, similar to what we did with the outriggers. It'll be like a little section, a little bit of a gap, kind of like a neck area, and then we'll have the front section of the ship, and it'll be hopefully beefy enough that it can help protect the forward section of the ship and all those important details that we've got visible here. And then we'll be able to, give a bit of thought to how we're going to manage the hard points for all of these different turrets that we're going to be attaching to it. And then refining the design, doing those cosmetic little adjustments and details. So this isn't going to be another mega build. It's not going to take all that long. I'm hopeful that it's going to represent a step forward in our ship design over the Malapis, which I felt was a huge step forward over the Spirit. So we're making progress one way or the other, just as long as we can keep making that progress and not regressing as time goes on. So if you want to be notified about the next episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.